Well, good afternoon. I'm Cindy Shufflebarger, the founder of P23 Retreat, and I am here today to talk a little bit about things that bereaved parents often wish other people understood about grief. And so I'm going to share a top 10 list today in no particular order, and know that each person's experience with grief is unique. So this might not apply to everyone, but as a general rule, these are things that bereaved parents often share that they wish others knew. If you're a bereaved parent, I would encourage you to chime in with comments and add other things that you might add to the list, or maybe even share your list of how you would prioritize these. But for those listening that aren't bereaved, our hope is that it will shed a little light on what the grieving process is like and to create some understanding and empathy. For those that are bereaved parents, maybe you will feel a little less alone, especially if you're in the earlier seasons of grief, to know that what you're feeling is not abnormal. And so hopefully, anyone who's listening today, my hope is that you will be encouraged in some way. So again, some of these are based on personal experience. Some of these are a compilation of things that I've heard from other bereaved parents. So I will start with the idea that grief doesn't end. And oftentimes people are uncomfortable with this idea. They think that there should be an end to our grieving. But the reality is that our love for our child never dies, and therefore our grief never ends per se. It will change, it will look different, it will soften over time, but it never goes away because our children will always, we will always carry them in our hearts and in our minds with us. And so know that that's not a bad thing or a sign that we're not doing it well. We are carrying our love forward for our child, and um, yeah, we're all doing the best we can. So grief doesn't end. Number two, things we wish that others knew about grief, that time doesn't heal. Many people would recognize this as a misconception that time heals. It can, however, teach us. We can learn over time, but just time alone isn't going to bring healing. And so we need to engage in different things to process our grief and to experience healing. Some would even argue that healing is not an appropriate term. I happen to like that term because it feels hopeful. Um, and so I like to see us engage in various activities to explore our emotions and to allow us to feel our emotions related to grief. Number three, saying our children's name is a gift. Oftentimes we fear that they're going to be forgotten, or we feel that people have forgotten our child. And so hearing our child's name is a gift to us because it reminds us that they are thought of and that their love and legacy continues. So look for ways, and maybe you share memories that you have of a person's child. You know, some people are afraid to do that because they think they're going to make the person cry. The reality is the person is probably already doing their share of crying, and when they cry, it's just an expression of their love. And so don't be afraid to say their child's name. Number four, grief shows up in unexpected ways, and I would add at unexpected times. Obviously, we expect that maybe around a child's birthday or the date of their death or holidays that we might get caught off guard with how our grief shows up. But it happens at unexpected times too. I can remember when it was around the time that my daughter would have been graduating from high school. I was really taken off guard that I experienced a wave of grief around that season. I had not expected it. We were, 18 years out nearly from her death. And I just wasn't prepared for the emotions that I would feel when I saw people in our circle of friends who had whose children themselves were graduating from high school, and I had this wave of grief that I had to engage and encounter. And again, I try to be gentle with myself and not shy away from it and just allow the feelings, and then that gives me a chance to think through and remember and to be gentle with myself. Again, I'm learning, and so it was another opportunity to put that into practice. But know that it can come at unexpected times. It could be at the grocery store and you're shopping for foods and you see your child's favorite box of cereal. It could be that simple. It could be a smell that triggers a memory. There are all sorts of things that can bring our child to mind, and we engage that grief. And I assure you, it never happens at convenient times because many of us don't like to have a public display of our emotions. Most people prefer to do that in private. And so if you see us crying in the grocery store, know that it could have been a grief moment. And again, not a bad thing. It's a reminder of our love for our child. Um, I can laugh and grieve at the same time. This is an interesting piece of grief because we are fully human. It is possible to explore, to experience a range of emotions all at the same time. And so I remember the first time I laughed after my child's death, and I felt like I had betrayed her. And it took some time to think through that and realize, no, like to be fully present and fully alive, I should be able to experience joy and laughter. That doesn't mean my grief is completely gone, but it does mean that I can experience the whole range of human emotion. And there actually, I would argue that it's important to still find laughter and fun, especially in the hard parts of grief, because it is so heavy and so consuming. And so we need to be able to take some breaks from our grief. And so experiencing laughter and fun is an important thing. And so if again, if you're in the early stages of grief, give yourself grace. I would encourage you to um, not be hard on yourself and just sit with whatever emotions arise. Another thing that we would love for people to know about grief is please don't compare your loss with my loss because it's just hard. Your loss is your loss, my loss is my loss. And comparing them, while it could be an attempt to connect, it's just a word of caution that our loss is still very, very difficult, even if yours is seemingly more difficult. And so this comparison doesn't help in the grieving process. And it doesn't leave us feeling more connected. Oftentimes, it feels more isolating and invalidating. And so just recognizing that any loss is hard. And again, I could apply that to any type of loss. Me as a bereaved mom, and someone who perhaps has lost a sister. I don't want to diminish their grief, um, because their love for their sister is also a very deep and meaningful relationship. And so it's just best if we try not to compare our loss and just recognize that grief is, there are different types of grief, but grief is hard and it's unique to each of us. Um, there's no timeline. I remember in the early days, someone telling me, you know what, I think it's just time for you to move on. And it was really early in the timeline, to be honest. And that's never a helpful thing to say to someone. It's okay to probe and ask questions like, what kind of healthy steps are you taking? Are you nourishing your body? Are you exercising? Have you considered engaging in a support group? Those kinds of things are helpful, but trying to rush someone along is not helpful. So, when we're grieving, we don't need other people's judgment about how we're doing it. I promise we are doing the best that we can do. And again, grief is learning. And so we're figuring out the process just like other people have to figure it out for themselves. And our relationship with our child is unique. Therefore, our grief is going to be equally as unique. And so extending patience to someone is truly compassionate and a gift. Again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't bring real concerns to people. If you see that someone's not able to get out of the bed, Don't ignore that by any means. Maybe you go sit with them. Maybe you lean in closer and you look for resources to help them. But putting a timeline on someone, it's best to avoid that. Number eight, support matters most in the long run. And so oftentimes we find that we are surrounded by support in those early days and early weeks, and then it very quickly diminishes because life goes on, as we know, and it gets back to normal for most people. But for the bereaved, we're still struggling to figure out what normal looks like for us now. A part of us has been ripped away essentially and removed from us, and we have to figure out how to live life in this new reality for us. And that doesn't resolve in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. It might not resolve in 1 year or 2 years. And so ongoing support is essential for someone who is grieving. And it doesn't mean that you have to be right at the person's side every minute. It doesn't mean you're still making meals for them, for 6 or 8 months, although you could be. Um, it means engaging and being present. It means asking the questions. Don't necessarily rely on the bereaved person to ask for help. They might not be capable of it. They might not know what to ask for. It is so overwhelming, fatiguing, exhausting, and brain fog can make it really difficult to communicate needs. I will say that on our website, under resources, we have a tool that people can use to help communicate their needs. And so I'd encourage you to go look at that. And there's a list of things that a bereaved person can just check off and then hand to their family member. And perhaps there's a point person who can distribute it to their support systems. But it's some real practical things, but then also gives them a space to write some very specific things that might be helpful to them as their grief journey changes. But just know that support is needed well beyond the 6 or 8 weeks that people often tend to extend help and support. So keep checking in, keep showing up. It might be a simple invitation to go get coffee or tea, going for a walk, going to the park. Just keep checking in on your friends who are grieving. Number nine, and I've mentioned this probably repeatedly throughout this, but grief is exhausting. It takes a toll, not just on our emotions, it takes a physical toll. People in the early stages of grief, in particular, are at increased risk of heart incidents, whether that's a heart attack or other heart arrhythmias and other distressing type things. There are things that are going on in all aspects of our life. It's not just emotions, it's our intellect, our brains are completely working overtime. There's brain fog, there's new connections having to be made. There's the physical exhaustion and toll on our bodies. Our immune systems can be impacted, our social systems are impacted, relationships, finances, every aspect of our life is touched by grief. And so just know that it is exhausting. And sometimes just getting up and getting showered and emerging out of the house for the day, that is success in those early stages. So know that it is exhausting. It's not just sadness that is happening. Our whole bodies are wrecked and we are trying to put things back together. And then number 10 that I will share, and again, this is not an exhaustive list, but we want to know that our child's life had meaning. And so you might hear us talk about our child years later, and it's not because we're stuck in a false sense of reality. It's because our child's life impacted us, and we want to know and be reminded that their life mattered in this world and that it is having an impact in this world. And so you will hear very healthy people, sometimes years down the road in their grief, making meaning, if you will. They're trying to find meaning for their grief. They're trying to find reminders for their child's life and continue to keep their love for their child alive. So not that they're I mean, they don't have to try to keep their love alive. They're trying to continue to act it out and express it in positive ways. And so that's a common trait among bereaved parents. So don't let that startle you or feel off-putting. I hope that you'll lean in and ask questions. If you're around somebody who is bereaved, again, ask questions, offer assistance, offer encouragement, and really just being present is the best thing sometimes. So I encourage you submit your things that you would add to the list, add those to the comments, add questions to the comments. I will be sure to check in and respond to any questions, and I hope that we can continue the conversation. All right, have a great day.